And tonight we are going to be, I say, celebrating, excuse me, as I cough here, another Pearl of Wisdom. So we are back on track with our Pearl of Wisdoms. And tonight is our 74th Pearl of Wisdom. So there's a lot in store. Welcome everyone as you're joining. Just make sure that your mute is on. Mynoo is in the background setting us up for Facebook Live. And it's going to be a really terrific one tonight. You know, this word impulse, this is what it's all about. I'm going to talk a little bit more once we connect to Facebook Live, but I've always had a negative connotation associated with impulse. And I think we're really in for a treat tonight because Mynoo's going to give us a new, interesting perspective. She calls it 7 irresistible surprises that are hidden in impulse. So again, we'll get more in depth on that as we get connected to Facebook Live. But I appreciate you all being here. Thanks for joining. It's going to be a really fun one. Mynoo has just given me a little inside skinny on it. And boy, was my perspective, I'm not going to say it was incorrect, but it was on the other side of the spectrum of what impulse could mean. I always was known as impulsive and took that to mean negative. But tonight we're going to delve into 7 irresistible surprises that are hidden in impulse. So we get to always hear this new vantage point from Mynoo, which is way up here. Sometimes we're just a little too close to the ground. So again, thank you all for joining. Get ready for these revelations, these irresistible surprises that will unleash vibrant vitality and infuse peace and vigor in anything that you direct it towards. So it will be a magic carpet ride for sure. And I'm so excited to hear what this new vantage point on impulse is. And I'm so blown away that Mynoo can do so many things at once. She's like our technical wizard. She's our spiritual guru. She's a business mentor. She wears so many hats and does it with such beautiful ease and grace. So we are so fortunate to be able to come on every Thursday night live and have her deliver this incredible wisdom. So thank you for making the decision to be here tonight. I think you'll be so happy you did. And as Mynoo said in her invite, this is a terrific one for you. And that is true for each and every one of us, getting to understand impulse from maybe a different perspective. So tonight it's going to open this doorway that maybe we haven't yet walked through before. And that comes with dreams coming true, desires getting fulfilled, missions accomplished. And I just want everyone to check your mutes and make sure that you are muted. We'll be able to do that again a little bit later on, but just to double check. So again, we're going to find this way of going through a doorway with this idea of impulse and what can actually be accomplished. Mynoo always calls it JEGO, which is that joy, ease, grace, omnipresent. So get ready for a good one. And again, it's the 74th Pearl of Wisdom. It's so hard to believe. I said, I'm getting like antsy that we're nearing the end. So again, you know, we have not that many left. I'm sure there'll be something else in store for us. So we will not be left in the dark. But thank you all for joining as we venture into these revelations of irresistible surprises that will unleash vibrant vitality in anything that you direct towards. Unleash vibrant. Okay, I'm going to have you guys, something is going on with our mute. So just check your mutes because I'm getting a little bit of feedback here. We are live on Facebook. Thank you again for coming to our 74th Pearl of Wisdom. And this is all about impulse. Impulse, 7 irresistible surprises that are hidden in the word impulse. The revelations of these irresistible surprises unleash our vibrant vitality. So get ready for, again, the magic carpet ride with Mynoo Maryel at the helm. And I see you are back with us, Mynoo, so I'll just turn it right over to you so we can get started and walk through that doorway to Lady Luck, as you call it.
I know, I like that, right? Meeting Lady Luck. Yes, it was good fun working with Impulse. So let's begin. Okay, so the 7 irresistible surprises hidden in Impulse. The first one is irresistible itself. And actually, when I think about times when I've acted on impulse, there have been times where I've just taken action, and because I was like in the groove or just drawn to it, and off I went and took the action. And that in itself, I recognize, yes, it was attractive to take action. It was tempting too, and also felt really powerful and convincing. And with that vibe infused in the action that I was taking, it became irresistible to others who were engaged in bringing about that action as a collaboration. So the first irresistible hidden surprise is that when you do take the action on impulse, there's like such laser sharp focus with which you're doing it, that you are in that vibe of, it's irresistible for you to keep going. And you keep going until the action is taken and it is complete. And just observing yourself, if you were to look back and find one moment and really work through this irresistible one, the first irresistible hidden surprise, you will find it was laser beam focused. You were completely present within yourself, and you were on the go. There was strength, there was center of gravity, there was intention, and that in itself made you very attractive. And what you were doing created tremendous curiosity, and it had its own attraction. And you were clearly, tantalized by it, and it became tempting and powerfully convincing for others too, to get engaged and involved in it. Just because of how you were being. So when I engaged with this body of work on impulse, what I found was it really brings you in a state of being that places you firmly in your truth. And when you are stationed firmly in your truth, you are present to your presence, and you are sharing that presence with momentum and intentional action. And that's what makes it irresistible. When I looked at it for myself, I recalled a particular time, and it wasn't that long ago, maybe 2014, 2015, that sort of time. So a few years, but not that long ago. And I remember going to Wall Street with our proposition of building this holistic a well-being resort. And it was happening in Bali. And some of you are here who have been great ambassadors of really having miracles become the norm, Palace of Extraordinary Miracles. And I remember going to Wall Street, and here's a project that's happening far, far away, actually, from New York. And I was in Wall Street for 18 months to get the financing structured from there, or at least part of the financing structured from there. I certainly didn't look the Wall Street part at the time, I would show up at meetings in smart outfits, and yet they were unusual. The project itself was very powerfully structured. It was completely, very attractive and very businesslike. The business plan was very businesslike. And we had a whole collection of very, very powerful Wall Street investors and investment bankers coalesce around this project. I mean, thinking back, it really wasn't a traditional project that they had ever funded before. And yet, we saw this happening. It was almost like, each one wanted to come in, even though the other one who was there, and they would never have done this kind of investment together with this other party that was already there. And yet, with our project, it literally was irresistible. In a place where, the space itself is far, far away, due diligence would take quite some effort to go through, and yet that was happening. It felt like it was irresistible. It felt like it had its own momentum. And with the benefit of hindsight and with this understanding of impulse and this first irresistible piece, when I look back, to me, the project already existed when I was presenting it. And I had my finance team to present it. And Dia, you're here and you were there with me on a few of these meetings, investor meetings. So, we had a very powerful, engaging team that was there. And all of us were completely embodying this irresistible part of impulse. We were completely convinced ourselves. We were focused and tremendously attracted by the project that we were doing. We became tempting to these skeptical investment bankers. And it all felt so powerful, and very convincing. The project itself had a power, and people coming in and backing us felt attractive and powerful themselves. And if they were to look at, were they using the kind of approach that they did in other projects? Well, the project did tick all the boxes. And yet it was out of the jurisdiction that they would normally go by. So they were acting on impulse, as opposed to, say, eliminating it right at the first step, saying that is not the jurisdiction that we work in. So with the benefit of hindsight, when I'm looking at, well, what was going on there? It was all of these hidden, irresistible surprises that were in action. So when I looked at, well, I thought being impulsive is, just not caring for the world and just getting on with it. We did get on with it. And we got on with it with intentionality. But we had done all of the background work ourselves. We had done all of the due diligence ourselves. So then we could actually be free. If any question was asked, we could go in and respond to that in the way they would expect a response, whilst maintaining the magical packaging of the proposition itself. So the key thing to remember with this first one, the essence of irresistible, which is number one, irresistible hidden surprise in impulse, is it's attractive, it's tempting, it's powerful and convincing. And that comes from where you are at, with what action you are taking. it is very clear from someone who is acting on impulse that they mean business, they can see the finish line and they are heading towards it, and they will get it. They will get to that finish line and they will cross that finish line. It's as if their intention becomes something which motivates and inspires you, and you start rooting for that person to get across the finish line just because of the way they are being. And it is this first irresistible hidden surprise, which is the secret of how and what they are doing. And it is this that illustrates how they're being. They are being irresistible. The intention that they're going for, the finish line is irresistible. And people that are watching them from the stands find this whole scene playing out in front of them irresistible. So the vibe of attractiveness, the vibe of powerful, convincing, job is done, is so much present in the air that there is no question. The result has already happened. It will be achieved. And that's the first irresistible surprise. Now, here's the thing. When impulse, when you're not doing it consciously, you're just rushing ahead, it can sometimes feel as if you're bulldozing your way forward. You're not even aware of what's there in front of you. But actually, if like someone who's running a race or whatever it is that they're doing, but if like them, you have trained and you have prepared yourself fully, when you go on the racetrack, you run the race. Just like for us, we had prepared ourselves fully. And when we showed up, when we were out there securing funding for this particular project, we were there as if it had already occurred. So it felt like the bandwagon's rolling. If we like the idea of full spectrum well-being, we want to be on that bandwagon. That's what happens. You immediately have this rolling forward effect that becomes visible to everyone. So that's the first irresistible hidden surprise. Let's look at the next one. The next one is masterful. The hidden surprise of masterful. I mean, the interesting thing is, when you act on impulse, there is action. It's literally like, I've just come out of a series of shoots this last 4 days or so. And our creative director, her voice rang in my, in my ears as I was engaging with this particular one, and how she went, cameras rolling, sound rolling, action. When you're in action, you are, and the irresistible piece is already very present. You feel competent, you feel masterful. Not only that, even if you don't have a mastery of the subject, just by the way of being, you're reflecting the power and skill of a master. So when you think about this impulse, when you're in action on this impulse, you automatically activate the hidden surprise of masterful. So if there was any undertone or any doubt, it's not there anymore. Just think back of times when you acted on an impulse. It's like you get into action and some sort of an inner strength comes in and you feel totally competent. And somehow the skills that you may not have, either they start showing up within you, or you become such a magnet to attract those who have got those skills. But it's like, it's very clear. You are skillful in your mastery, either having exactly the skill that you want to get this job done, or being skillful in magnetizing that which you require in any particular point in time. You feel masterful. You exude the presence of a master. And when people come in your presence, it's as if as they come in your presence and they are going to support you, they step into their own mastery. And it becomes a masterful implementation. When you're acting on an impulse. So in some ways, this body of work that we are doing here, the Pearls of Wisdom, and the works that have gone on before, navigating the 7 seas, or navigating the unknown, nuggets of wisdom. They're all those pieces that coach you to be ready to be able to act on impulse. When you act on impulse, there is always a finish line. And it is intentional that you are crossing that finish line. So your presence shifts, and your presence becomes that of a master. And that is what becomes infectious. And it's as if, like, in most of the Pearls of Wisdom, I say, go sequentially. Start with 1, then 2, then 3. And here also I say, go sequentially, except each one not only builds on the previous one, it in fact propagates the previous one. So it makes the previous one regenerative. So when you are masterful, and you're enjoying the benefits that rise from the masterful, irresistible, hidden surprise, you're becoming even more irresistible. Your project is becoming even more irresistible. And that's making you experience even greater mastery, enriching your power and skill, reflecting that as a master, as people around you start to rise in their own mastery. So how do you work with this? Really benefit of hindsight. You take a point in time where you acted on an impulse and you got across the finish line. Really, just postmortem it. Look at it by unpacking everything that occurred every step of the way. And see how these irresistible hidden surprises showed up. What it also does is, when you do this, what it also does is it makes you realize how wonderfully blessed you are. I remember in my life, this is a long time ago, and I was very heavily pregnant at the time, like 6.5, 7 months or so, showing quite clearly that the baby was due very soon. And I got chosen I was in a job actually at the time, not in business, I was in a job. And I got chosen amongst the 10 people out of the 3,500 people that worked in that organization to be sponsored for a management MBA program. And then I was going to go through that final interview with a panel. And the head of HR said to me, okay, we are not going to be, it's important for us not to be discriminating, but the answer you will need to be prepared for is, how are you going to take on this undertaking? It's quite a significant program when you are just about to have a baby. So you may want to consider what that's going to take for yourself. And, okay, I went to the interview, and they were convinced that I should be amongst the 10 people who will receive this scholarship. I actually didn't consult anyone at home, didn't talk about it to anyone. I acted on an impulse and I said, yes, I will do it. This was a management MBA program. And the way it worked was, you had 5 days of immersive, out of station, off-site classes on one of the topics that was essential for an MBA. So for example, we had a 5 days of immersion in marketing, 5 days of immersion in finance, 5 days of immersion in corporate finance, like that. And it was spread over 2 years. So it was every few weeks, we would have a 5-day immersion. And basically this program was designed for you to choose 3 very live projects where you would implement the learning from these immersive sessions. I mean, it was not easy to do this with such a young child. It was not easy to do this. And I had acted on impulse. And I heard no end of this from, my friends and people that were close to me, that, this is your problem. You act on an impulse. And look at it, now you've used so much money of the organization to sponsor you to go through this, and you've taken somebody's place, so now you have to go through this. I never felt I have to. It was not easy, but I never felt that I have to do something that I didn't want to do. When I was really looking at this particular hidden gem, a hidden surprise, I found so many gifts that I continue to use today, that emerged from that act of impulse. I completed the MBA program. I completed it a little before 2 years. And as a result of that, I created, one of my projects was the creation of my new business. And that was the first business venture that I created. As a result of that, I learned how, before you launch the product, you actually prove that your customers are going to pay for it, and have a collection of them pay for it, so that that you'll have the critical mass when you launch it, which means your product has to be so clearly defined. I learned something that I teach, this whole process of how do you get buy-in into anything that you wish for people to buy into in such a way that it makes perfect sense to them, and they are delighted with the choice that they have made. So many things emerged from that. This whole idea, which is how I operate, when I take something on, I'm able to go into a deep immersive state of really being that subject, and then doing it several times until I've mastered it. I mean, that habit, that way of operating emerged from there. I had a young baby, and I was doing an MBA program, and I had to keep my job going, and I had all this dysfunctional stuff going on at home in terms of domestic violence in my relationship. So when I focused in the immersion in the immersion week, I knew that whatever I learned, I actually had to translate it into my project so that when I came out of it, I was simply implementing it. But I had already started the implementation bandwagon in those 5 days. Others who were doing it with me didn't necessarily look at it that way. But for me, it was necessary so that I could come home and be present to my child. So many facets of what I call as my mastery, what I recognize as my mastery, came from that choice of impulse and choosing to go into a management MBA. It put me right at the top, shoulder to shoulder, and in the center sometimes of some of the top echelons from a variety of sectors in British industry. Doing that particular program served me no end and continues to as I've moved forward. And that came from that point where I chose to act on impulse. That's possible. So it was powerful. It was so exciting for me to go do this benefit of hindsight stuff on this. So I invite you to take something where you have acted on an impulse and got across the finish line with you going. Now, when you do act on impulse, just like for me, I had lots of voices of people who really cared about me saying, back off now. You know, just say that you acted on impulse. Take the hit. Don't see through it. I mean, I cringe at the thought of what might have occurred. You know, it made me an international entrepreneur. It got me to understand each facet of business. At the time that I was being taught by masters from academia as well as industrialists, at the same time in those 5 days, I was implementing it. And therefore, the questions that I had in those 5 days weren't theoretical questions. Because once you did the 5 days, after that, you'd really work with your academic tutor and your in-company mentor. Whereas in the 5 days immersions, we had some of the best from industry there teaching us what they did. So I learned this different way of even learning through implementation. And the other piece that I've always been good at is starting, not necessarily finishing. Here, because I had a young family at home and all of this other stuff that was also running and required me in my mastery, I didn't go into yes, but no, but. I just acknowledged. I didn't know I was using the power of acknowledgement as a tool at the time, but I just acknowledged and kept going. The immersion weekends, or the immersion weeks, sorry, were actually very, they weren't large. We weren't lots of people. We were like 11 or 12 of us that were there. So they did several of these. So it was, it's only doing this benefit of hindsight, applying the impulse lens, really looking at it from this mastery irresistible surprise, that I recognized so much of what I feel I have a mastery in today came from that act on impulse. And keeping it going. This is the biggest pitfall that you may come up against when you do act on it. keeping it going. Anytime you feel yucky about going where you're going, that's when you pause and re-examine whether you've got disconnected to the intention. What I found was, yes, I did experience yuckiness, but it was more about, people feeling that as if they had some control over my life. And I didn't like the way they were judging me for, not being an adequate mother and carrying on with something like this. That's where the yuckiness was. But because I had my time so focused, and by the way, there are several of you here who I have taught the technique of time segmentation versus traditional time management. It came from me choosing to do the management MBA program. That's where I learned time segmentation. Segment your time and be true to the segment. And you will experience magical results. Like no question, the results are achieved when you operate this way. So my time segments went from 2 hours to literally 10 minutes. I became so good at immersing fully, soaking it in, and I would not step out of that immersion until I had implemented what I had learned at least twice. That's how I knew my bandwagon is rolling. I now get marketing. My bandwagon is rolling. I now get corporate finance. I hadn't become a master, but before I left those 5 days with all of these corporate finance experts and masters and academics and peers who were doing the program with me, I would have done it at least twice over, implemented it. Now that was a discipline. That was a process. I don't think I've shared this process with anyone, but now I recognize that's where it came from. And I implement it all the time. All the time. So I invite you to, if I could, and this came from because I was post-morteming it. I chose to take this incident and post-mortem it. Section by section, literally like organ by organ, examining what is there with a very specific intention to distill and decipher. I also looked at times where I've acted on impulse and not got across the finish line. And every time it was because my choice of acting on an impulse, it began with that, was a rebellion. It was an act of rebellion. So I wasn't even prepared for it. And it doesn't matter whether I'm prepared for that or not, but I did not have the resilience prep that is required when you choose to act on impulse. Act of rebellion means somebody else can come in and attack you and completely, take you off, like a revolt builds up. And then you start reacting to it, attacking back, using the force with which, if you had made the choice of acting on impulse, like I did when I chose the management MBA when I was nearly 7 months pregnant, that was not a rebellion of any kind. I wasn't rebelling against anyone. I chose that as a choice I made for me. So yes, there were naysayers all over the place. And yes, there were what I call as emotional blackmailers from some of the people that I really cared about, saying, if you do this, I'm going to be really upset at you. And I don't know how I cannot support you with this. I'll have to walk away from being the support. Okay. I literally was able to receive them for who they are, but I did not need to waver from what I had chosen. Didn't feel the need to at all. I also didn't feel the need to justify. I didn't feel the need to share so much. And it was many years later, my sister was saying, oh, I didn't realize you were an MBA. There's no need to do any of that. But now when I look at so much of what allows me to integrate spirituality with business and see it as one and deliver it in such a way that even the most hardcore business people implement this way of operating. It came from there. It got me to master implementation and getting across the finish line. So don't take it lightly, even if it means you take 2 or 3 months to postmortem a time when you acted on impulse and got across the finish line. Because when you anchor these 7 hidden secrets for yourself, you can repeat it anytime. Consciously, unconsciously, subconsciously, you will stay on track. Post-morteming at least one of those, really getting the nuances, you're taking your mind along. Your thoughts are being honored for how they supported you with all of the gifts, which you will see for yourself as you work through the hidden secrets that I'm talking about. So do it, and do it without compromise. Anchor it in reality. Let's look at the third one. The third hidden secret, hidden surprise actually, is perky. I don't edit the words. I just write it down. Okay, a hidden surprise being perky sounds good because it makes me feel cheerful and happy and like really briskly self-assured. And just taking the management MBA example. I mean, I remember the first time I left my little baby at home to go and do the 5 days immersion. It felt stressful, did not feel yucky. It felt stressful to just that moment when I'm leaving and moving, because in the 5 days was in another town. And there was still a spring in my step. There was this odd sense of self-assurance that existed. And the funny thing is, when I look back, the child wasn't crying. He was just happy. I was the one who was more, feeling that I should have all these sad emotions. It was like pulling at my heartstrings. I wasn't sad though. He was certainly briskly, self-assuredly happy. Sort of feeling, Sai, my son, has always felt the vibe of where I'm at. Even if I put on a front of being happy, he would know when I was sad inside and react like that. So he was like super enthusiastic and excited, exactly as part of me was feeling inside. And I must say, it is this perky hidden surprise in acting on impulse that keeps that life force moving and that brings that vibrant vitality, that alertness. When I look back, it was in this beautiful, beautiful resort type estate in a place called Horsham, called South Lodge was the name of this particular estate. And it was completely gorgeous, 4-poster beds. You had to climb up a few steps to get on them and stuff. They're quite awe-inspiring. So that in itself made you feel perky. And the way I was learning I could easily have gone in and said, I'm just going to be a sponge and I'm just going to take everything I possibly can here. And that would have been a good way to participate in this program. I was also clear that if I just took all of that, when I come back, I will not have time to implement it with the level of rigor and get across the finish line, because I'll have to also have time to discuss it with someone if things didn't go exactly as I planned. So I was clear that I was participating in these 5 days, not just to soak in, but to get the bandwagon rolling of implementing what I had learned. I had to create my own strategy, because when I spoke to my academic supervisor, he said, oh, nobody does that. You're just complicating it too much. And sure, it might have been complicating it too much, except I had taken this program on as an acting on impulse. And it was that impulse part within me that was saying, you must get the bandwagon of implementation rolling. Otherwise, it'll become a bunch of theory on marketing, on finance, corporate finance, HR, layered upon each other, that at some point, one day in the future, perhaps 2 years, 3 years, 4 years down the line, you will need to engage with implementation of it. So that also was a choice, which was a choice of impulse. And that created all these wonderful ways in which I managed my time. Time segmentation occurred there. And this perky, hidden surprise kept that vitality going, kept that vibrancy going. I hung around in the dining room, but very rarely spent evenings in the bars because I was focused on implementation. And yet, nobody really said, oh, she's a propeller head, the academic one doesn't really join in. They didn't feel that I didn't join in. I wasn't a holier than thou. I was actually really sharing how I had worked on implementing what I had learned. There was no bravado there. There was just getting on with it. And because I didn't know that I was being fully present to be able to do all of this stuff at the same time as learn about these completely new subjects. I was a software developer, not a business person. So a lot of this was completely new to me. What I knew was learning from benefit of hindsight is great, but actually applying it, especially when we are presented not just by academic case studies, but by masters from industry coming and sharing situations that they were dealing with here and now, they will be open and ready to understand my perspective as I implement what they have shared here and now. I mean, the situation was so phenomenal that by the time I got to the 4th day breakfast, the industry leaders who were actually going to come in and work with us that day, somehow the word had spread. They would proactively put themselves on my table. And I was like, wow, this is great. Talk about learning about an elevator pitch. And it was an elevator pitch, not about pitching for a project, but an elevator pitch summarizing what I had learned and how I had implemented it and what questions were arising from it. And I'm pretty sure, though I can't say completely that way, but just like I share these pearls of wisdom, there are 7 steps, 7 pathways, and I teach you how you work with them, in a way that anybody can do something with it. And even if you only worked on one pearl of wisdom in your life, and in that pearl of wisdom, you worked on one of the ways, there's going to be a massive contribution to transforming quality of your life and that of your loved ones. I'm pretty sure it came from the foundation was set from that act of impulse when I chose, and I was nearly 7 months pregnant, to do a management MBA. The fourth hidden surprise. And I mean, when I engaged with this, I was like, oh, yes, of course. You know, it is unequivocal, leaving no doubt, unambiguous, absolute, apparent, categorical, clear-cut, decisive. I mean, wow, what a hidden surprise. When you are acting on impulse, and it's not an act of rebellion, even though you may be rebelling, but this time you've chosen to act on an impulse, to see something through across the finish line. This is the power that you have. So people can come and throw curveballs at you. They don't become a curveball for you. They just become something that perhaps touches you a bit and deflects. It's as if you develop that unequivocal prowess that keeps you on track and sees you across the finish line. And it is that makes you so irresistible. It is that has you relate to yourself as a master, and you show up as a master with others. It is that is the secret of that perky, vibrant vitality. You are unequivocal, leaving no doubt. It's unambiguous. So sure, when I first had my discussion with my academic supervisor, and I shared that, okay, right now I only know one project. I don't know the other two yet. I just know I'm going to really work what I'm learning here so that I don't ever have to go back and revisit the basics of business again. So he got it. I was unequivocal about that, left no doubt. But it's when I started talking about, how can I use these 5 days to learn and implement? So that when I go back, I've already got the muscle memory of implementation. And I can keep going. That felt, odd to him because it wasn't clear how that could even be done because it hadn't been done before. And I was ambiguous about what I meant. I just knew what my finish line was from each of the 5 days. So that was an absolute. And I was categoric about, at the end of the 5 days, I would have learned about the subject. I would have created my connections with senior people from industry and created a camaraderie with collaborators who were doing the program with me from other companies. And I would be on a roll. I was quite explicit about that. It was obvious that I was going to carry on and make that happen, make that come about. There was a vibe of certainty that was there. And as a result, I was quite clear in the learning that I was doing. It wasn't just a collection of note-taking. There was a context. I knew my first project. And I was going to apply this learning to that project. By the time I got to the third immersion, I think we had 12 such immersion weekends. By the time I got to the third immersion, it was downright evident that by the time I get to the 12th one, the 3 projects would be implemented already. Which was not what they expected. They expected that you would have learned everything And perhaps 2 projects would be implemented. The third one would get implemented several months down the line. It was downright evident to me, it was, and to everyone. So the kind of support that I got, it even shifted the kind of people that they chose to bring in. I mean, the interesting thing is people talk about the lowest common denominator is what pulls the intelligence of a group, but actually it worked the other way around. Because I was so engaged in implementation, it actually got others to become more aggressive in the implementation of what they were learning. So it called for a higher standard from our academic professors, as well as from the industry experts that were being brought in. There were several industry experts that actually came in on video conference, which was not intended, but they came in because of the way we were implementing it. We needed to have their inputs and their insights. And that was this unequivocal, leaving no doubt, unambiguous, hidden surprise of acting on impulse. I'm getting very carried away and we have 4 minutes left. So let's look at the 5th one. The 5th hidden surprise in impulse is lighthearted. Now, all of this could have become really heavy and serious and all of that, you know, but we really felt, I felt amazing. And it was entertaining sometimes making the mistakes that I was making, you know. It felt like, even though I had so much stuff to orchestrate and manage, I still felt free from care, anxiety, or seriousness. There was a bit of a happy-go-lucky, lighthearted mood. So every time I left for the 5-day immersion, people at home, everyone would be very excited. In fact, for several of these immersions, I took my son with me, and you know, he stayed in the room, you know, slept in the room with me. But throughout the day, there was so much there to do. Nobody felt off-put by having this child that I would go and see in the swimming pool or something from time to time as I was doing the course. People themselves became lighthearted about it. And that is a hidden surprise. And you will find it when you choose your benefit of hindsight, act on impulse, postmortem project, you will notice this lighthearted piece. Without that, the perkiness doesn't get to move you forward. The 6th one is the hidden surprises. It's stupendous, extremely impressive, causing astonishment or wonder. Everything that I have shared with you, it continues to astonish me, leaves me in a state of wonder. It was extremely impressive how it kept me going. It literally was like, you know, if I had to hit the bullseye, the only thing I saw on that board was the bullseye and nothing else. Whilst being empathetic and fully present, you are actually really aware of your space that you're in. The empathy is so spot on. You don't get sucked into a point of distraction, but you can empathize. You act with compassion for yourself and those around you. It becomes a very beautiful exchange. With the level of intensity with which I went in, I could have been a drain to those that were teaching us, and I wasn't. I would say, looking back, when I apply these 6 hidden surprises, irresistible hidden surprises of acting on impulse, each one of them was playing out. It was completely stupendous. This experience continues to fill me with wonder. And I explode with a sense of gratitude and appreciation for having gone through it and seen it through. And the seventh one is, the seventh irresistible surprise is elegant. You remain in a state of grace. And as you remain in a state of grace, there's a gracefulness that emerges. There's a stylishness, there's a tastefulness, there is a finesse that is there with which you engage in that entire project that you are acting on impulse with. I can't emphasize enough, find something from your life where you acted on impulse and saw it all the way through. I know some of you, I already know some of your act on impulse projects. Happy to share certain triggers for you to go down the memory lane and enjoy the power that you have been bestowed with by choosing to act on impulse at some point in your life. Bring that conscious awareness to the 7 irresistible surprises that are yours to savor, enjoy, learn, and build on. Over to you, Catherine.
Well, my friends, I'm sure you are all taking lots of notes, and another opportunity to learn through implementation. I just love this exercise of hindsight. And when acting on impulse, it really shows us our mastery. So thank you, Mynoo, for that reminder. And when we feel yucky, just reconnect to our intention, which probably will automatically deflect a lot of that emotional blackmail and curveballs. So stick with it. We'll have some fun playing with this one. I love hindsight. And we look forward to seeing you right here next Thursday for our next Pearl of Wisdom. Is it 75 already, Mynoo?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, it's 75 already, 25 more to go. No, let's see. We have 108, not 100. So we still have ways to go. Thank you all for joining. Thank you, Mynoo, for the beautiful insight. I have a new perspective now on this Pearl of Wisdom and impulse. And we will see you all right here next week.
Thank you all. Thank you. Namaste. Thank you.